Okay, so continuing on with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the legal causes of action that you can be sued for under this. Sexual harassment. Here is the test for sexual harassment. If you notice, this test is a great deal more narrow than it looks if you listen to TV or movies. It is only sexual harassment if the conduct is tied to continuing employment. So let me give you a couple of examples. Robert follows around Fatima all the time and tells her she has beautiful breasts and he wants to go out with her. Robert is Fatima's coworker. Is that sexual harassment? No, it's not tied to continuing employment or advancement. However, if Robert follows around Fatima and says she has beautiful breasts and he wants to go out with her, and that if she went out with him, she would be favorably disposed in a promotion, that is sexual harassment because it's tied to continuing employment or advancement. So your question to me is, well, it doesn't matter who Robert is. He's still harassing Fatima. Well, true. But in the first scenario, she'll have to sue under hostile work environment. And here's the test for hostile work environment. Now, the issue with a hostile work environment is that this is completely determined by the plaintiff's perception of what is hostile. This isn't determined by an outside standard. So the Robert Fatima question is an easy one, isn't it? But it could be a more difficult one. Let's say that I have a coworker who wears Trump t-shirts every day, and I find that hostile, or it interferes with my job performance because I am Mexican and I think he wants to deport me. That might create a hostile work environment, and there's your test. The other issue, and this is a huge issue in the law, is with the American with Disabilities Act, which is a subset of laws around the EEOC beginning in 1990. I have the two additional A's in parentheses because it's been significantly amended twice. And every time Congress amends it, it makes the law very expansive. And then courts tend to narrow the law. And then Congress comes back in and makes it expansive again. And here's our definition. I'm going to go backwards with this. Being regarded as so impaired, this really refers to people, for example, people who are burn victims. They might not have any disability, but they are unpleasant to look at. They look like melted wax. And for that reason, they are discriminated against. And so they are covered under the ADA. Having a record of an impairment, a good example of this would be multiple sclerosis. Sometimes patients with that disease are very disabled and sometimes they're just fine. But in either event, they are disabled under the Act. And then in the first definition, this test, I used to have bold substantial and major because those are how the courts would narrow that definition. But after the Third Amendment from Congress in 2008, those words are fairly meaningless now. If you have any disability, you're going to follow under the American Disabilities Act. And in fact, there were some disabilities that were excluded from the Act, and increasingly less and less are. Congress is really becoming quite aggressive with the way they want this act treated. If you are disabled, then this test works for you. Please note, you must be otherwise qualified for the job. So I'm disabled, and what are my reasonable accommodations? One is I need to have a podium, a little wood podium that goes on top of the table when I teach. And the workplace has to provide that for me when I'm doing on-ground teaching. And that's considered reasonable because it's very cheap. It's less than $100, and it serves my accommodation perfectly well. And I am qualified to teach, so CCD is required to make that accommodation. AMC, the giant Chinese-owned movie corporation, they were required to put elevators in all of their theaters for disabled patrons. However, the Mayan, little local independent movie theater here in downtown Denver, are not required to do so because it's not financially feasible for them. And that's it.